This is the Texas Tinfoil Podcast.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first ever Texas Tinfoil Podcast. Today we are bringing in lore, I guess you could say, for Texas. I'm your first host, Mog, and then I got my co-host, Tex. So let's get into the biz, should I say, when it comes to our lore. Our first lore we want to start off with is a local here in West Texas, called Shafter Lake. Most people around West Texas know about Shafter Lake. They claim for it to be haunted. They see apparitions. They see apparitions of a Confederate soldier that roams around. They see hollowed-eyed kids, which is pretty crazy. And they also see a woman in white that walks around the cemetery in Shafter.
So before we get too far along into that, Mogley, what do you say we cover? But it's located in Andrews County, north of Ector County, and west of Martin County. If that'll help you out, it's pretty close to. It's literally on the border of New Mexico. So give you an idea where it's at there, and let's get into the history of it. So that way we can knock all this out. This guy I'm gonna pop on screen right here. This here's a short history of it, right? Because I'm not gonna just read Wikipedia, and I'm not a history teacher. So originally this location that had a lake in it was originally called Salt Lake, right? When it was developed at the turn of the 20th century. Now it was not. It says that it was found, but I mean it existed before this guy found it, right? But the guy who laid claim to this back in 1875 is this gentleman on screen. This is Major General William Rufus Shafter. Now, this guy's not just some, Union soldier that just showed up. This guy's been around the block.
Most people know this guy by Pecos Bill.
Yeah,
just so everybody knows.
Yeah, I popped that on there. It's got a little bit of stuff on him right there. This guy, to say this guy's a veteran is no joke. This guy has been in multiple wars. He was in the Civil War. After that, he was in the Indian Wars, and then the Spanish-American War. So this guy had been around, and to say he's done some tours, right? So this town, originally called Salt Lake, was named after William Shafter. Yeah. So the town was platted in 1907. Before the end of that year, there was an estimated 50-ish houses that were in the town, or the growing town, right? A little more along those lines. They had just set up a post office, and they had just made a cemetery that same year. Now, they had plans for making a railroad and several other things to be a go-between between Lubbock and Midland. That actually never happened. But it did get a pretty good-sized population of up to 500 people, is what they estimate in 1910. But the sad part is, in about 3 years, they went from only having a post office to having a bank, having 3 churches, 2 hotels, a school, a blacksmith, general store. I mean, this place was a booming town. Now, the problem with that is any town that starts to grow, you start to get into a sort of competition. And the competition they were into was the county seat, right? So who in Andrews County is going to be the seat of the county? So you have a bunch of cities or towns that are developing in that county that are just going to be the main town. So they went to county seat war, if you want to call it that, with the city of Andrews, which was, a couple miles away. So after this whole debacle, Shafter lost. And after that, a large portion of the people that were in Shafter Lake left Shafter Lake and just moved to Andrews. And either they went there, or because the town was no longer a bustling, growing town, everybody had moved to the town that won. Now, Andrews was a growing town, but we're not talking about Andrews right now. So smallpox broke out, right? This is in like 1911, 1912, right around there. There's a huge outbreak of smallpox. And there was, I don't know, nobody's exactly sure of the population at the time. They just know that there was a lot of people that passed away that were still in that town. The vast majority of the people got sick. A large, I say large as in, it's by most accounts, it's more than half of the population died. And these people, it's reported they were very, obviously smallpox gets you sick, but people were delirious from the, from this disease. And there was a lot of horror stories out of this, right? Smallpox is not just a small thing, believe it or not. Don't let the name
y'all, there was no cure for this at the time.
Yeah.
This was like fairly new kind of stuff coming from Europe, all that jazz. So
well, and the survivors that made it past the smallpox, they buried the dead in the cemetery that they had just built a few years ago when they made this town. They buried them, and by that following year, 1912-ish, around there, the vast majority of the survivors just either moved to Andrews or Lubbock or Midland. They left. There's no reason to stick around. All bad luck at one time, right? So there was only one guy left in the town, and he stayed to become a rancher. He originally was the postmaster for the Shafter Lake town, and he actually stayed and became a rancher. And believe it or not, throughout all the generations, I don't know how many it is, 2 or 3, whatever it is, since that time till now, to present day, his bloodline still owns Shafter Lake, the area, and they still ranch. So as far as I know, they're still running cattle and horses and doing all that. That's the short and dirty of what happened there.
Yeah. So as far as the ghost stories goes, there are 3, as I've mentioned before. We have the Confederate soldier that roams around. We have the hollowed-eyed kids, which means they would show like they didn't have any eyes or whatever. And then of course, I believe I said the lady in the white as well. So, and she supposedly roams the cemetery that was once there. Now, I've heard many stories. I go to Andrews from time to time. I do have relatives over there. But most of the locals there, they always say the same thing. Do not go. Now you can't go there. It's closed off to the public that I know of. But when I was younger, we used to go there and we would try to see if we can find the paranormal. Me personally being there, I've experienced some weird things, but I couldn't say it's paranormal. That's just maybe the skeptic in me. I don't know. I do believe in some things, but as far as that goes, I mean, I've heard noises, coincidental noises that happen, like, if you say this, kind of saying stuff. Now, I've heard people say they've seen the Confederate soldier roaming around. They've said he would ride a horse and he was headless. That's one of the stories I've heard. Another story is I heard that people would hear like cannon fires going off, like if there was a battle going on. I haven't heard it. I wouldn't know, but there's a lot of locals that have told me that. Um, the lady in white, I don't really hear too much about. I've only heard about with a couple of locals about it, that she roams around, kind of like. Have you ever heard of the Llorona? It's kind of like the same story, but it's if it wasn't with. She's looking for her kids or something like that died from the smallpox. But that's just some of the crazy stories I've heard.
So, all right. So let's break it down. You got reports of Confederate soldiers or Union soldiers or soldiers in general fighting both the Native Americans, each other, the Union and the Confederacy, Civil War thing, right? So you have the Civil War soldiers fighting each other. You have the Union soldiers after the Civil War was over. Possibility of them fighting the natives in the area, which that's this was a big, highly contested area with the Comanche for a long time. So
Right.
that kind of goes without saying. But so you have the troops or the military. You have that one story. The other story is the lady in white, right? Walks around the cemetery doing whatever she's doing, and for whatever reason, people see her. She kind of fades away, or no one's reported any attacks or anything. Just her being there.
And so now, as
But
far as the
you're
hollow
missing
kids,
so you're missing the main one now.
now here's the thing: the hollow kids. I've heard a lot of stories that like is probably the main story was the hollow kids. People would say they would go to the lake at night and they would hear kids crying, and when they would hear the kids crying, they would like turn around to see if maybe it was like a kid that fell or something, kind of like obvious things, like there are kids there that play, so
Right. Well, back then,
maybe
yeah.
at night, well, back then, but you would think, okay, maybe one of the kids' parents, they fell down and they started crying. But the weird part is there's nobody there at night. It was just a couple of, just a couple of locals. Freaked them out. They said that they had got a flashlight and kind of shined out, didn't see anything, and then they turned around and then they said that like maybe like not even like maybe like 5 feet. They said they saw kids there with with just holding their like hands like they're crying. And then when they asked them what was wrong, the kids like basically like kind of like that cliche, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's like playing peekaboo and then
they remove
boom,
their. It's like
no
a horror
eyes.
movie. They remove their hands and their eyes are gone.
Their eyes are gone, like kind of like that Jeepers Creepers thing,
There's a jump scare.
Oh God! And could you imagine though? Like, oh geez, they're supposed to be kids and they have no eyes.
Well,
But
I'm sure the people that saw that it freaked them out.
I bet. But that is like main. I've heard that one. I've heard one where people were just skipping rocks at the time on the lake. They turned around and they saw like kids out in the water, and they can see them with no eyes. I've heard crazy stories, man. Stories that are believable and some that are just like, I
So
don't know about you, bro. You kind of seem like one of them
so
people.
what's the lore or what's the reasoning? Because during the pandemic or epidemic, I
So,
shouldn't say
so with the
pandemic,
kids,
but
so
during
with the
the
kids,
local epidemic in 1910, 11,
it was
11-ish.
1912, I believe. But so when the pandemic happened with the smallpox, there it was so bad that they actually went to a witch doctor. Believe it or not, that's bizarre beyond me. Looking for a remedy for these smallpox. Me, I don't know. I'm not much of into voodoo and stuff like that. I don't To each their own. Let's just put it that way. To each their own. But it got so bad that when they used these home remedies that this witch doctor made, it caused them to hallucinate. The townspeople to hallucinate. It got so bad that they started gouging their eyes out.
Yeah.
It got so bad that they thought their children were demons or of that nature, so they gouged their eyes out. They went pretty much crazy. Hence why we got the hollowed-eyed kids was because they said that it got they started everybody just went crazy and started gouging each other's eyes out, from the hallucinations, I guess whatever they saw or the bad trip that happened. It was just bizarre. So me personally, that being said, it is what it is. That's the story. I mean, I've looked up as much as I possibly can, but that's pretty much the story on that one. I mean, it gets pretty gruesome, but that's probably the worst one that I've heard, that I've read about, of why it happened to begin with.
I mean, I would have to say so. The military thing, like I can kind of see people talk about like Gettysburg and a bunch of things where there's still like these. I don't know the exact nomenclature for this type of haunting and that type of haunting, and there's the names and
what is it called? Residual and then intellectual hauntings. Residual means like a movie, and then intellectual is like when you can talk to them and they answer back, kind of thing.
Right, like an intelligent.
Right.
Personal, whatever. Like the non-personal or residual. Whatever. I say residual, but I don't know. There's some people that are like that's not the right term for it. I don't know. I'm just gonna put it like this. I can kind of see that because there was a lot of bloodshed in the area. Again, Native Americans were fighting and killing everybody to maintain their land. You know, keep a healthy distance between where they were staying and where the people were moving toward them. Right. It didn't work out for them in the end, but I can kind of see that. And then of course the Civil War. You know, that was big sweep in this area. People, you know, the front between the North and the South changed all the time. You know, there was always constant raids back and forth. I could see that. It's a big emotional scar. I can see some of that, but
I could see that.
So let me. I'm a little jaded, a little skeptical. Okay, I'm a lot skeptical. I'm a little jaded and a lot skeptical of most things, right? So like I don't want to just sit here and just like shit on everything, but let me take like 5 seconds and use like a little bit of my brain. Let me just shit the bed for a second here. All right. So part of the story you talked about like soldiers, one of them being headless and all that. Remember the original story of that was William Shafter himself with no head. But that's not true because we all know that I say we all, but anyone who's done any reading on it knows that he died in California a year before Shafter Lake even became a fucking city, right? Even before it became a town. Right. He had a ranch in California. So after he had done his service for the Union Army, retired, went back, or either retired or just left. Either way, got leave, went back to his ranch and bit the dust. So he gave up the ghost, and that was the end of that. Now, does that mean that his ghost can't come back, and there's no residual hauntings, or there's no this or no that?
Right.
I don't know.
No way, right?
I mean, I don't know. Me personally, I don't believe it.
He probably would have died in peace. I mean, if he went to his roots or wherever he went, you would think.
I don't know, man. Like William Shafter, like I just said, this guy right here, a veteran of multiple wars, and you don't go to war that many times unless you're just sitting in the far back, like on a horse, pointing fingers. You don't do that unless you're drawing a good amount of blood, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So that means he probably has dirty hands. I'm assuming the guy got in the middle of it. He had to get promoted somehow, right? So whether he actually got his hands dirty and there's reports of him actually fighting Comanches and getting some wins, and then the Comanches getting the upper hands in other fights, and they have to retreat, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of back and forth, man.
Kind of like the little. Is it the Little Bighorn? Is that how you say it? The war.
That's a totally different thing.
No, that's kind of like something like that. You would think.
I mean, I think it's like anything else, man. It's just territory. They're like, hey,
yeah, that's true.
You guys are getting a little too close.
Natives.
You got to defend. Yeah, you got to defend their their way of life and their land, and I can see that, but
sure.
I don't know. I've been out there. Yeah, the photo that I put in right here for Shafter Lake, there's that one house that's left. The reason they closed it off to the public was because of two reasons. One, it's an oil field place. You can see there's pump jacks in the lake here. There's some in the far distance. You can see there's telephone poles, electricity, all that stuff out there. And then you can see there's a pump jack right there, or artificial lift anyway, in the middle of the lake, right? You got some on the water. You got some in the lake. You got some around it, some in the distance. West Texas is an oil field or petroleum industry town, right? Area. So when you got that much oil field equipment, that much risk of H2S gas leaking and killing people, generally
There's
speaking,
a lot of things that can happen. It could be really tough. And the
oil field
worst thing
traffic.
is H2S is called the silent killer for a reason.
Yeah. So you got a whole bunch of liability. That's one reason. The second reason is even if they weren't going that far into it, there's also the risk of people destroying and vandalizing not only the few remaining, I wouldn't say like artifacts, but I mean the few remaining things that were left of that town of Shafter Lake.
But not
So
only that, it's also private property.
There were people that became private property, yeah, when Irwin branched it off,
Right.
but there were people that were going there that were, they were knocking down tombstones, they were stealing stuff, breaking into a few houses that were falling apart, and just doing dumb stuff, man. So I could understand that, them just saying, look, man, just leave it how it is, don't fuck with it, leave it alone. And I gotta have some kind of respect for that, right? But me, I don't, like I said, I don't want to just outright dump all over it and be too cynical, but I don't buy the Shafter's troops fighting the natives. I've been out there and I've worked in the oil field in the area. It ain't nothing new. There's a lot of old stuff out there being refurbished. They're plugging off wells, cutting off heads, getting rid of the Larkin stuff and doing this other stuff. And they're doing what they call retrofits, which is where they're putting new conventional equipment on these wells so they can continue to produce or plug them off.
I can see them doing
nobody out there since I've been not a child, since I've been of working age and working in the area, nobody out there has ever mentioned anything about seeing ghosts, hearing anything. I mean, of course, when you're on a rig, you ain't gonna notice sounds from anywhere else anyway, but people pull over on the side of these lease roads and go to sleep. I'm one of the guys that do that. So it is what it is, but I've never heard any stories like as an adult, right? So I don't buy that. I've never seen anybody on a full moon, in the middle of the night, ghosts, horses with people on them riding them, and never seen it. So I don't buy that. Not to say it couldn't happen, but I think a few skirmishes here and there. I don't think it leaves too much of a, they call it like an emotional or whatever. There's some kind of psychic scar or whatever the fucking terminology is that these ghost guys use, right? I don't think it's that big of a thing. Otherwise, we'd see it everywhere, right? Now, the cemetery, the lady in white walking around the cemetery. I've never physically been to the cemetery, but you can see it when you're driving down certain leash roads. It's out in the distance. And I never took an interest in it, so I never went over there, never did any of that stuff because I really didn't care about it. Never heard anybody tell any stories as an adult. Never heard anyone tell any stories about it. I think it's just something that, honestly, I think it's something they just tell kids because you just got to have something to talk about, man. You're in Andrews, which is a town over. There's this old, decrepit, falling apart remnant of a city, just ruins out there of a town, right? It didn't make it. Was hit by an epidemic. Bunch of people died. It's the proper setup for a horror story, right? And it's the cool part is well, not for them, it's not cool. But I mean, in terms of being a storyteller, it's the proper premise, it's the proper setup, and it's factual. You can look it up that it happened that way. Now, maybe not so much about the witch doctor thing and everybody gouging their eyes out. Again, that's a story I've heard. But let me ask you this. Let me be in the middle of nowhere, right? Like medicine comes few and far in between. Medical care is sorely lacking in the area. You're going to go to a local witch doctor. What is a local witch doctor? He's probably a Native American. So you're going to go to a Native American and say, hey, we have smallpox. I'm pretty sure they have it too. Remember the blanket incident? Anyway, they're handing them blankets. These guys are getting it and dying from it too. I don't think they're going to have anything to solve this. So you're going to go and you're at odds with the Native Americans, right? We just read about them fighting them. So, hey, I know this is World War II and we're fighting the Germans, but we're sick. Let's go to that German camp and see if they give us some medicine. Are you going to trust the medicine that the Germans give you? If you're mortal enemies in World War II, I highly doubt that. It's the same thing in this situation. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Everybody's played that story out. But if you're like, hey, this disease is wiping out my enemies, why am I going to help them? You wouldn't, right? So maybe maybe the few people that did go over there and talk to him, maybe they did give him some crazy poison, caused them to hallucinate, and they died from that. But I don't know, man. I find that hard to believe. I don't know how far off or how far down the road you have to be with smallpox to just say, fuck it, I'll try anything. I mean, to me, like you have to already be out of your mind anyway.
Yeah, basically, you're just really that desperate. That's how I feel.
Now, EDPs mostly disturb people, people that have like certain mental disorders or mental diseases. They I don't want to just pin it all on people with psychosis or whatever, but people that have psychotic breaks, to be, what's the word I'm looking for here, cliche, when they have schizophrenia, that kind of thing, they may see things that aren't there or see something that isn't true. Those people, EDPs, do have a break, mental break, not all the time, but these people are more likely to have mental breaks where they hurt themselves or someone else. So, I mean, to say that they took this medicine and drove them insane and they did these things, that's plausible. That's plausible. I'm not going to shit on that, but the situation to get you there, I'm really, really pressing next to doubt, man. Like, to be real, like, I feel really bad, like, because I don't buy it, bro. Let me use a southern expression. Since we're in Texas, that dog don't hunt, right? That dog don't hunt.
That's it.
The next one, the children, right? The children, that's shitty, man. I've never seen any of them. Again, just drove by, never seen anything. But
I've been to Shafter.
But as an adult, man.
Well, I was 18. You know what I mean? Obviously I'm older now, but when I was younger, when I could actually understand, right from wrong, obviously.
Yeah.
I've been there at night. I really didn't witness anything, honestly. Maybe I was at the wrong time. Who knows? Maybe that's what it was. Well, there's a lot of things that can go into things. Oh, well, you weren't there at 12, or oh, you weren't there at 3. What, at witching hour? Come on now.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing. You got to be there at 3 in the fall on Halloween on a full moon, 3 in the morning. Like there's all these specifics, right? That's weird. So bring up why don't we
just do it like at nighttime sometime? It's got to be the witching hour,
right? So why don't we just look at it like this? Let's ask the people that are not always just in the area, but they own it. They're always there. The owner, Chris Tom, he owns Shafter Lake, right? He was interviewed, and here's a snippet of the interview. Okay, the snippet of the interview. Right? He said, with an ancient graveyard, pump jacks in the middle of the water, and many other historical things, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I guess that's just been a going thing in the area, and I've never seen anything that apparently this is good enough to put on the news, but not good enough to punctuate. I've been out here all my life, but I guess when you're in a small place like Andrews, Texas, you have to have something to talk about, While Tom says he hasn't seen any spirits personally, he loves the Shafter Lake. It's still a topic of conversation to this day, with only 2 families living in the area now. So supposedly he hasn't seen anything either. It's a barren area, but it's a very special place for those who have lived there. We love it. It's just different. It's a different spot in again, they can't proofread their own fucking writing. It's a different spot in the county, and it's a unique area for us to come set up. Look, man, like I may be slightly grammar Nazi. I may have a little of that in my blood, I guess.
Come on, if you read,
but like, bro, you're putting this.
You gotta
proofread your shit. Proofread your shit.
You gotta study this. I mean, come on. You speak like you talk, man.
It's fucking. It's hard enough, bro. It's hard enough when they type word for word what he's saying. I mean, I get it. People, when you're out here, people speak different. You speak different from the way that you write something, right? You don't have to put Shakespeare on paper, but I mean, fuck, bro. At least proofread your fuck. You don't need 3 ends in one sentence. Bitch said, different spot in the county. Like, again, it says it right there. Mogley, look. Very last sentence. It's a different spot in the county. That's why I literally pointed that out, because proofread your shit, guys. You only work for the news, right? You're only bringing fucking pertinent information. I mean, I guess when you're only talking about fucking hauntings, you're talking about haunted areas and hauntings and shit like that. I guess nobody's gonna take you serious to begin with. But
let's get our helmets on, guys. I mean, geez.
Fucking, where's it? I need 2 layers, bro. One tinfoil for these stories that don't make sense, and another one for the fucking ability to proofread this shit before they do. Fuck. Like, is this a rough draft, or what are we doing here?
Oh, right, goodness.
So I don't want to be a dickhead, but anyway. So in my opinion, Mogley, on the validity of this story, man, 1 to 10, kind of where you sitting on this? 1 being not valid at all, hearsay, and 10 being, I guess, like proof positive or whatever. What would you give this?
Why don't I just give it a 5? Just because of the story, you know what I mean? I like the way I like the story, you know, people saying, oh, it's haunted. You know, I give you that, man. Like, I haven't seen anything. The owner himself has said the guy lives on the land, obviously on his land, said he hasn't seen or heard of anything, you know. But I'm gonna give it a 5 because of the story of what it represents, bro. Like, I think the story's awesome.
Everything's completely wrong. Everything's completely wrong, but I give it a 5. Bro, I can't give the story alone, the historicity of it. I give it a 4. History. For the history, I give it a 4, and that's the only thing it stands on is a 4. And for the people's ability to tell the story and hearing these stories as kids, you're like, damn, that's crazy. Stay away from there. Because again, it has the perfect fucking background, the perfect historical background to be a horror setup, right? Horror story.
Right.
But other than that, that gives it a 4. Your base of 4. And to me, everything after that, as a kid, kiss that shit goodbye, man.
That's it, bro.
And to me, bro, Texas is a big place, right?
Oh, so, yeah.
Like, there's plenty more.
Everything's 5 hours away from each other. I mean,
yeah. There's plenty more to talk about. There's plenty more to go over. There's plenty more to do. So if you want to cover certain parts of Texas, I mean, I think we can keep doing that. I think we don't need to be pigeonholed to just covering ghost stories, but I think that it is interesting to discuss paranormal stuff.
I mean, I like the paranormal stuff. Like,
you guys are listening to this podcast. What do y'all think? Do you think this is something that's plausible? Leave us a comment on whatever platform you're listening to this on, YouTube or whatever. Leave a comment on it. And
right, if
you got any ghosts or horror stories in your area, let us know. Because
we'll research it, we'll look it up, and we'll tell you what we think. There's always opinions.
I'm gonna steal this quote. We're like 7-Eleven. We're not always doing business, but we're always open. So, all right, that should be it for us. This is Texas Tinfoil Podcast, man.
Yeah, I'm Moog.
I'm Tex, man. We're getting the fuck out of here.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know know I'm gon' feed 'em. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing.